Who hit you? The Mafia boss asked the next day. Every door in the city was broken down. The bottle of ibuprofen felt too small in my hand, the plastic rattling with only a few pills left. It was 3 a.m. on a Tuesday, and the 24-hour pharmacy on Rivergate was lit like an operating theater. The fluorescents hummed, buzzing under my skin, making the purple-yellow stain blooming under my left eye look worse than it was. It felt like a typographical error on my own face, a messy correction mark in violent ink that ruined the whole page. I'm Lila Navarro. I work the night shift at the Ashport Underground Archive, and I understand paper. Paper is clean. It holds the truth in neat, orderly lines. This mark on my face was chaos. I kept my head down, letting my dark hair fall forward as a curtain, my hand covering the side of my face as I pretended to read the ingredients. Outside, the October rain wasn't just falling, it was cutting. It hit the pavement like tiny knives, turning the neon sign of the Rivergate Pharmacy into a bleeding watercolor of red and green across the wet asphalt. This was Ashport, a city of wet stone, rust and secrets, built on the bones of old industry. It's a city that drowns its sorrows in salt water and cheap whiskey, and tonight, it was weeping cold rain. I'm used to the quiet and the dark, the smell of old paper and climate-controlled dust. The world above ground, especially at this hour, always feels too loud, too bright, too violent. A car pulled up to the curb. I only noticed because it was silent. A gray sedan, the kind that costs more than my entire apartment building, the kind that glides instead of drives. It looked like a shadow detaching itself from the darker alleyways. It didn't belong here, not in this part of Rivergate, where the only things open were this pharmacy and the all-night diner that smelled of burnt coffee and desperation. The driver's door opened. A man stepped out. He wasn't dressed for the rain. He wore a tailored charcoal suit, a black shirt, no tie, the kind of suit that costs at least 5 figures, the kind that's cut to move. The rain didn't seem to dare touch him. He moved with a heavy, settled grace, the kind of absolute stillness in motion that comes from knowing exactly where you stand in the world and knowing that everyone else will move around you. This was Antonio Ruggieri. I didn't know his name then. Not for sure, but I knew his type. He was old Ashport, the kind of power that doesn't need a sign on the door or a name in the papers. He was seasoned, his face handsome in a way that had nothing to do with youth and everything to do with angles and shadows. His dark hair was slicked back, not by the rain, but by choice. His eyes found mine through the glass. They were dark, and they didn't just look at me. They looked into me. They were like a surgeon's scalpel, precise, assessing, looking for the sickness, the break. I froze, my hand still holding the ibuprofen. He crossed the sidewalk in 2 long strides, stopping just outside the automatic door, which hissed open for him, but he didn't enter. He just blocked the light. He looked at the bottle in my hand, then his gaze moved slowly, deliberately, up to my face. He studied the bruise. His expression didn't change, but the air around him went colder. His voice was low, a quiet rumble just loud enough for me to hear over the hiss of the rain and the buzz of the lights. "Who hit you?" My blood went cold, then hot with shame. You don't get asked questions like that in Ashport, not by strangers, and certainly not by men who look like him. You learn the script. The lie is your shield. It's the first line of defense. "I fell," I said. My voice was rough, sandpaper on wood, tripped on the curb coming in. A flicker of something impatience, maybe pity, maybe just disgust at the lie crossed his features. He didn't smile. He let out a slow breath, a small cloud in the cold air. He shook his head, a barely perceptible motion that said he knew. He knew I was lying, and he knew why. He reached into the inner pocket of his suit jacket. For a second, my heart stopped. But he didn't pull out a weapon. He pulled out a business card. It was thick, heavy, cream-colored stock. He didn't offer it to me. He stepped just inside the doorway, out of the rain, and placed it on the stack of free community newspapers by the door. He pushed it toward me with one finger. I looked down. There was no name, no company, No logo, just a string of 10 digits, a phone number pressed into the paper in clean, black letterpress. I glanced at the pharmacy security guard, an older guy named Sal who usually shared his lukewarm coffee with me on my way in. Sal was suddenly very busy inspecting the expiry dates on a rack of cheap candy bars, his back rigid. He hadn't seen a thing. Nobody ever sees anything in Ashport. Violence is just background noise, like the traffic on the bridge or the harbor foghorns. We live with it. We walk around it. We don't look it in the eye. And we certainly, under no circumstances, look a man like Antonio Ruggieri in the eye. My phone buzzed in my coat pocket, a heavy, insistent vibration. I didn't need to look. I knew who it was. Owen Brack. He'd be waiting, parked in the alley behind my building, stewing in his own petty, vicious rage. Owen, the slick security manager for the Civic Shield Initiative, a benign-sounding name for a group of corporate vultures picking the city's bones clean. He wanted me to fix a fire permit record in the archive, to backdate it, to make an illegal shipment of hazardous chemicals look like a simple clerical error. I told him no. I'm an archivist. The records are what they are. The truth is the truth. This bruise was his response, a hard, open-palmed slap that had sent me staggering into a metal shelving unit back in the archive's sub-level 3. The sound had echoed in the silence of the stacks. The new text message would be another threat. Think about your job, Lila, or maybe a picture of my apartment door. Think about where you sleep. The man in the suit, Antonio Ruggieri, didn't wait for me to take the card. He just looked at me, one last time, his gaze holding mine for a beat too long. It was a look that weighed me, measured me, and filed me away. Then he turned, walked back to the gray sedan. Before he got in, he gave a slight nod, almost invisible, to another car parked across the street, a dark SUV I hadn't even registered, its windows tinted to black. A driver was waiting there. The sedan door closed with a heavy, expensive thud. The car pulled away, its tires hissing on the wet street, disappearing into the rain as silently as it had arrived. I stood there, the buzzing in my pocket suddenly silent, as if it, too, had been intimidated. I understood that nod. It wasn't a threat. It was a transfer, an instruction. I had been marked, not as prey, as something to be watched, something protected. The thought was more terrifying than Owen's threats. My hand, the one not holding the painkillers, darted out. My fingers closed over the thick card. It was still dry, untouched by the rain. I slid it deep into the pocket of my coat, away from Owen's buzzing phone. The card felt hot against my skin, a physical weight. It felt like an escape hatch. It felt like a trap. In Ashport, they are very often the same thing. I walked to the counter, paid for the ibuprofen, my hand shaking just slightly. The cashier didn't meet my eyes. He'd seen the car. He'd seen the man. He just wanted me gone. I pushed open the pharmacy door. The cold air hit my face, making the bruise ache with a fresh, sharp sting. I pulled my collar tighter and stepped out into the rain, heading toward the alley, toward the archive, toward the life I was trapped in. Far off, from the harbor. A foghorn roared, a low, mournful sound that cut through the downpour. It sounded like a warning. It sounded like a premonition. The night was far from over. The Ashport Underground Archive isn't a library. It's a tomb, a climate-controlled, concrete-lined tomb where the city's bones are filed away. My job, from midnight until 8 in the morning, is to translate these bones into ghosts. I am a digital archivist, 3rd class. I sit in the quiet hum of sub-level 4, surrounded by the smell of aging paper, vinegar and ozone from the industrial scanners. I unroll structural blueprints from the 1950s, the paper stiff and yellow, and feed them carefully into the wide-format scanner. I digitize subway tunnel maintenance logs from the 70s, the handwriting of the foreman looping and angry, noting water seepage and track fatigue. My specialty, the one Owen Brack assigned me to, is permits. Specifically, blasting permits for new construction. chemical transport manifests, and high-voltage grid updates. I take the physical, fallible, potentially flammable truth and turn it into searchable, editable, and easily corruptible data. My world is one of precision, a 300 dots per inch scan, a metadata tag, a checksum hash to verify the file hasn't degraded. It's a quiet life, a life of cataloging. It's the only one I've ever wanted. When my shift ends and the weak gray light of an Ashport dawn breaks, I take the number 12 bus to Dock 9. The first thing I do, before I even try to sleep, is check on Mrs. Dorothea Hale. Her apartment is one floor below mine, in a building that has seen better decades. She's a widow. Her husband lost to the docks 20 years ago, and she lives on a pension that's about 50% wishful thinking. I bring her milk, her medication, and I sit with her while she drinks her morning tea. She calls me her little paper speaker. "You're the only one I know, Lila," she told me once, her hands, knotted with arthritis, resting on mine, the only one who knows how to make the paper talk sense. Last month, I helped her win a 3-month battle with the city over a pension clerical error. I just found the original filing, cross-referenced the digital entry, and proved a data entry mistake. To me, it was just correcting a file. To her, it was groceries. That's why the file in the urgent processing bin at work felt like a personal insult. It wasn't old paper. It was new, crisp, and wrong. A stack of cold storage building permits along the embankment, numbers 7, 11, and 14. They all bore the fresh, embossed seal of the Bureau of Urban Integrity, a city agency I'd never even heard of. The manifests attached were for industrial solvents, precursors for things I didn't want to think about, all filed under cold-pressed fish oil. Owen wanted me to fix them. That was his word. "Just backdate this one. Lila," he'd said 2 nights ago, sliding a single permit across my desk for a container of vinyl chloride. Date it for last month, before the new port tariffs. I told him no. I said the intake stamp was clear. I couldn't change the intake stamp. That was when he hit me. The first time, a quick, sharp slap that cracked like a staple gun in the dead silence of the archive. The shock was colder than the air conditioning. "You're a data entry girl," he'd hissed, his face pale and tight. "You enter the data I tell you to enter." He left the file on my desk. It was still there tonight, waiting. I saw him again tonight. Not Owen, the other one, Antonio Ruggieri. I was leaving the archive, the first gray light just touching the razor wire on the fence. It was just there, standing by the staff emergency exit, the heavy red metal door that led out to the service alley. He was wearing the same dark suit, a different shirt. He wasn't looking at the building. He was looking at me. He didn't come closer. He didn't move. He just stood, hands in his pockets, and his eyes found mine across the 50 feet of cracked pavement. He didn't have to say a word. His gaze was a question, the exact same one he'd asked in the pharmacy, a silent, demanding echo. "Who hit you?" I froze, my hand on the gate's latch. My blood turned to static. Owen was a bully with a mid-level management title and delusions of power. This man was power. He was the apex predator of Ashport. I turned away, my heart hammering against my ribs, and pushed through the gate, walking fast, not running, down the street toward the bus stop. I didn't look back. I could feel his eyes on me the entire block. Back in the archive, in the last hour of my shift, my hands had been shaking. Not from the cold. I looked at the file, Owen's file, the fake BUI permits. I pulled my phone from my bag. It's an old model, 5 years out of date. The screen cracked, but the camera works. My movements were automatic. The muscle memory of my profession. I laid the first permit flat on my scanner bed, not to scan it, but for the clean, even light. My left hand was trembling, a slight, irritating tremor, but my right hand, the one I trained, the one I use for fine point pens and archival tape, was rock steady. It's the strange thing about me. My grandfather taught me calligraphy. He said a steady hand comes from a steady mind. My mind was screaming, but my hand was quiet. I took the pictures, one of the fake seal, one of the signature. one of the shipping manifest, one of the backdated file Owen wanted me to process. I photographed all 8 pages. I opened a new email on my phone, attached the images, and sent it to an email address I'd created years ago, a digital lockbox. Then I put the email into my drafts folder. Not sent, not yet, just safe. There are rumors in Ashport. You hear them in the diners, at the bus stops, in the silence of the night shift. Whispers about the Ruggieri Consortium. They aren't a company. They're a parallel government, the old kind, built on loyalty and fear. They own the unions, the fish market, the private sanitation, but the rumors, the ones the old women in Dock 9 tell, always have one common thread. The consortium has laws, unwritten, but absolute. And the first law, the one that's never, ever broken, is that no one under Ruggieri's protection touches women. No one touches the elderly. It's bad for business. It's bad for the soul. It made the bruise on my face feel even more wrong. Owen didn't operate by any laws at all. I've always had a dream. It's a quiet dream, small and heavy, like a block of lead type. I want to open a print shop, a letterpress studio. I'd call it Navarro Letterpress. A place where I can make things that are true, where the ink sinks into thick, cotton paper, and you can feel the impression, the weight of the words, a place where I can fix the things that are broken, not by deleting them, but by making something new and beautiful to stand against them, a place where paper tells the truth because I told it to. When I got to Dorothea's this morning, she must have seen the shadow in my eyes, the way I flinched when she reached to hand me her teacup. She didn't ask about the bruise. She's from Dock 9. She knows better than to ask. Instead, she shuffled over to her overflowing junk drawer and pulled out a single, old, ornate iron key. "This was my cousin's," she said, pressing it into my palm. Her skin was like dry paper. "He was the caretaker. 40 years ago, up at the Calder Observatory. I knew the place, a long-forgotten, brass-domed building on the highest hill overlooking the harbor, abandoned since the city built the new planetarium. There's an attic apartment, once she said, her voice a soft conspiracy. Just a room, but the door is strong. No one's been up there in years. The view as well. It's the whole city. You can see everything from there. Lila, no one can sneak up on you when you can see everything." I looked at the key. It was an escape. It was a vantage point. I made the decision before I even finished my tea. I would move my things tonight, just a few clothes, my grandfather's calligraphy pens, and my laptop. It was a way to get out from under Owen's thumb, to get out of the apartment building he watched. I would be off the grid, but still in the city, still in his sight, perhaps. But I realized, as I remembered the man at the emergency exit, I would also be in Antonio Ruggieri's. The air in the Mariner subway station was thick, smelling of ozone, wet concrete, and old despair. I kept my head down, my duffel bag with my few possessions digging into my shoulder, the iron key from Dorothea heavy in my pocket. I was almost out, almost to the street, almost to the hill. Then, shadows detached themselves from the tiled wall. Owen. He wasn't in his usual slick manager's suit. He was wearing a black windbreaker. Just like the 2 blunt-faced men flanking him, they formed a wall in front of the turnstiles. My exit. My breath hitched. My stomach turned to ice. "Going somewhere. Lila." Owen's voice was a low hiss, trying for casual but vibrating with rage. He was shorter than his 2 goons, but his malice made him seem taller. "You've been a busy girl, ignoring my texts, leaving work early." My shift was over, Owen. Let me pass." He smiled, a thin, wet crack in his pale face. "I don't think so. We need to have a chat, and I need your phone. You've been photographing things that don't belong to you." One of the goons stepped forward, his hand out. "The phone! Now!" "Don't forget who feeds that archive, little girl," Owen whispered, his eyes darting to the bruise on my face, a flicker of pride in them. "Don't forget who can starve you." I took a step back, my spine hitting the cold tile. Trapped. The platform behind me was empty. The station was a concrete box. A sound. Not a sound, a lack of sound, a high-frequency whine, slicing through the heavy air. A black electric motorcycle shot down the ramp from the street, a place no vehicle should be. It slid to a halt on the tiled floor, the rubber tires screaming, stopping perfectly between me and Owen's men. The driver was a woman. She was small, coiled, and wore a black leather jacket. She pulled off her helmet, and a shock of short, silver hair fell free. She looked at me, her eyes the color of a winter sky. "Come with me if you want to breathe," she snapped. Her voice was sharp, all edges. Owen lunged, his hand grabbing for my bag. "Bitch, you're not going anywhere." The silver-haired woman kicked out, not at Owen, but at the bike's pedal. A kickstand? No, she flicked something on her handlebars. My mind couldn't process it. "Go!" she yelled. I didn't think. I scrambled. I threw my leg over the back of the bike, my bag slamming against her back. I grabbed her waist. Her jacket was cold and stiff. Owen's goons were on us. The woman, Yara Quell, twisted the throttle. The bike didn't roar. It shot forward, a silent black arrow. We blasted past the turnstiles, the metal bar clipping my knee, sending a jolt of pain up my leg. We were up the ramp and onto the street in 2 seconds. The city lights a sudden, blinding smear. Rain was falling again. We skidded onto the main road. A horn blared, but Yara didn't slow. I looked back. Owen and his men were piling into a black sedan parked at the curb. They were right behind us. We were not escaping. Yara took a hard right, then a left, cutting into an alley so narrow I had to pull my knees in. Brick walls blurred past. The alley opened up onto a service area. All loading docks and overflowing dumpsters. A dead end. No, not a dead end. A set of concrete stairs led up the side of a building, an old fire escape that led to nowhere, wreathed in steam from a laundry vent. He was standing there, Antonio Ruggieri. He was standing on the 4th step, hands in his pockets, the steam swirling around his suit like he had materialized from smoke. He watched us skid to a stop. Yara Quell cut the engine. The sudden silence was deafening, broken only by my ragged breathing and the distant shout of Owen's men turning into the alley. Antonio's eyes were not on Yara, they were on me. He walked down the steps, his expensive leather shoes silent on the wet concrete. He stopped 5 feet away. The black sedan screeched into the alley entrance, blocking the only way out, its headlights pinning us like insects. He didn't look at the car. He didn't look at the 3 men getting out. He just looked at me. The bruise. The terror. "Who hit you?" His voice was different. The cool curiosity from the pharmacy was gone. This was cold iron. This was not a question. It was a demand. "I fell," I whispered. The lie came out, a pathetic, automatic reflex. "I told you. I tripped." His head tilted, just slightly, a flicker of profound disappointment. He looked, for a second, almost sad. Then his face hardened. He reached into his pocket, not for a card. He stepped forward, closing the distance. I flinched. He stopped instantly. He held out his hand. In his palm was a small, white metal tube of ointment and a new card, this one with a name, Alma, and another number. "She is my physician," he said, his voice low and flat. "She will come to you. You will not lie to her." He didn't offer the items. He waited for me to take them. My hand trembled as I reached out. His fingers were warm as they brushed mine. He placed the items in my palm and closed my own fingers over them. "Basic medical care," he said, his voice dropping to a near whisper, his eyes burning into mine. "This is what I consider a basic right." "Get away from her! Ruggieri!" Owen shouted, as his voice cracking. He was trying to sound brave, holding a small, silver handgun, but it was shaking wildly. His 2 goons looked less certain, their eyes wide, darting between Antonio and the silent Yara Quell. Antonio didn't even turn. "Yara," he said. Yara was off the bike. She moved like a whisper. She tossed something underhand, a handful of tiny, dark objects scattered across the wet ground in front of the sedan, steel ball bearings. "Now," Antonio said to me. He stepped to my side. Yara grabbed my other arm. Run, Gull Row! We ran. We plunged into the narrow opening of the Gull Row night market. The shift was instant, from a dark, silent alley to an explosion of light, sound and smell. Red lanterns swung overhead. Music blasted from tinny speakers. The air was thick with the smell of grilled squid, anise, and damp cardboard. Crowds of people pushed and shoved, buying noodles, looking at trinkets. A shout from behind us. Stop them! We pushed through. Yara was a wedge, carving a path. I just tried to keep up, my bag banging, my lungs on fire. I heard a crash, a man screaming in pain. I looked back. Just for a second, Owen's 2 goons were on the ground, tangled up, their limbs at odd angles. They had slipped on the ball bearings. A stall selling cheap porcelain lamps had collapsed, the lights shattering in a spray of bright, falling stars. Owen was standing there, his gun lowered, his face a mask of disbelief. He was on his phone, screaming into it. He's here, Ruggieri. Yes, I said Ruggieri. What? I saw his face go white. Not pale. White. The color of bleached paper. The color of bone. He stared at the phone, his mouth open, his bravado gone, replaced by a raw, primal terror. He had called someone upstairs. And the person upstairs was more afraid of the name Ruggieri than they were of losing their illegal shipment. Owen lowered the phone. He looked at me, his eyes wide. He didn't follow. Keep moving, Yara said, pulling me into another, darker alley. We ran for 2 more blocks, the sounds of the market fading. My legs were jelly. My chest felt like it would split open. Finally, Yara stopped, leaning against a brick wall, breathing easily. I bent over, hands on my knees, gasping. He's coming, she said. I looked up. Antonio Ruggieri was walking toward us, not even breathing hard. He had come a different way. He had just arrived. He stopped in front of me. Yara Quell nodded once, then vanished into the shadows, as silent as the motorcycle she rode. We were alone, just me and him, in a narrow alley, the city's hum all around us. He didn't touch me. He just started walking, slowly, toward the street that led up the hill. I fell into step beside him. He walked parallel to me, half a step away. He didn't hold my arm. He didn't guide me. He just was a solid presence, a human wall between me and the rest of the world. We walked in silence for 5 minutes, up the steep incline of the hill toward the dark, domed shape of the Calder Observatory. The city fell away below us, a carpet of glittering, indifferent lights. At the base of the final set of stone steps, he stopped. The old iron gate was just ahead. The lie, he said, his voice quiet. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking out at the harbor. It's beneath you. You don't know me, I gasped. I know what I see. He turned, and his eyes held me. They were dark, unreadable, and saw everything. If you tell me the truth, Lila Navarro, I will break every door that needs breaking. The words hit me. Every door. I thought of the archive, the heavy steel doors of the sublevels, the locked file cabinets, Owen's office, the Bureau of Urban Integrity, the cold storage warehouses. I swallowed. The name was on my tongue. Owen Brack, a small name for such a large, ugly network. I swallowed it back down. To say it was to hand him a weapon. To say it was to admit I couldn't fight for myself. To say it was to let him into my world. And I knew, instinctively, that once he was in, he would never leave. But I also knew he was right. I looked at the key in my hand, then at him. I couldn't say the name, but I could do this. I nodded. It was a small movement, just a dip of my chin, but it was enough. The truth could wait for another night. This, for now, was a start, an agreement. He watched me for a long moment, then he nodded back, a gesture of grim acceptance. He gestured to the gate. I was safe, for now. The old iron key felt cold and heavy in my hand. It scraped in the lock, a sound of rust and disuse. The heavy oak door groaned open. Complaining about being woken up, I stepped inside, and my duffel bag slid from my shoulder to the floor. The Calder Observatory was a circle of shadows, dust and starlight. The main room was vast, a rotunda directly under the massive brass and glass dome. Moonlight poured through the panels, illuminating a fine layer of dust on everything. And through the very center of the dome, a long, thin crack ran like a silver scar, the old unblinking eye of the sky, fractured but still watching. Then I saw it. His people had been here. The dust wasn't thick. It had been recently disturbed. In the center of the room, someone had unrolled a small, clean rug. A single string of warm, yellow-gold fairy lights had been hung in a loose spiral from the lower railing, casting a soft, kind glow that fought back the cold shadows. An upright piano, its wood dark and thirsty, stood against one curved wall. On a small, sturdy table, a brand-new electric kettle sat next to a box of tea and 2 clean mugs. The sound of the kettle clicking on made me jump. A woman stepped out from a small alcove I hadn't seen, a room that must have once been the caretaker's office. She was in her 50s, with kind, dark eyes and hair pulled back in a neat, severe bun. She wore simple gray scrubs and carried a black medical bag. "You're Lila," she said. Her voice was calm, a soft alto. "I'm Alma. Let me look at that." She gestured to my face. I hadn't realized I was still cupping my hand to my cheek, where Owen's ring had caught me. The chase through the market had made it throb, and the bump from the subway turnstile had split the skin. "It's just a bruise," I said. "It's an injury," she corrected gently, "and it needs to be cleaned." She led me to a stool by the table. I looked around. Where was he? As if summoned by the thought, I saw him. Antonio Ruggieri was standing across the room by the tall, arched windows that overlooked the harbor. He was in darkness, a silhouette against the glittering, cold lights of Ashport. His hands were deep in the pockets of his suit trousers. He was giving us space. Alma was all gentle efficiency. Her hands were warm, her touch practiced. "This will sting," she warned, and as she pressed the antiseptic wipe to the cut, a sharp, white-hot pain made me hiss and clench my fists. I saw him move in the darkness. He turned his face away, looking out the window, his posture rigid. It was a strange, small gesture, a courtesy. He was a man who trafficked in violence, but he couldn't stand to watch the sting of its cleanup, a kind of chivalry so rare in his world, or in mine, that it almost didn't make sense. Alma finished taping a small, clean bandage to my cheek. "You'll have a slight scar," she said, packing her supplies, "but it will be a clean line." She handed me the tube of ointment he had given me, twice a day. "He will send someone to pick me up." She nodded to me, then to the shadow across the room, and let herself out the heavy oak door, the lock clicking shut with a heavy, final sound. The kettle whistled. For a long moment, there was no other sound but the high, thin shriek of the boiling water. I stood up, my legs still shaky. He turned from the window. We were alone, 30 feet apart, in a circle of fractured moonlight and warm, golden lights. "Tea," his voice was quiet, respectful of the space. "Please." He walked to the table, poured the water into the 2 mugs, and steeped the tea. He did it with an unhurried, domestic ease that seemed at odds with the man at the emergency exit, the man in the pharmacy. He pushed 1 mug toward my side of the table. I didn't drink. I unzipped my duffel bag. I pulled out my phone, connected it to my laptop, and pulled the image files from my draft folder. Then, one by one, I opened them. I turned the laptop around on the table so he could see. The evidence glowed in the dark room. "Cold storage 7, 11, and 14, I said, my voice sounding too loud. "All leased by the Harborline Task Group, a semi-public city works initiative. All the permits were fast-tracked, all signed on the same day." I clicked to the next image. This is the seal. Bureau of Urban Integrity. It's fake. The font is wrong. It's Century, not the official city Garamond. The embossing is too shallow. It's a high-quality forgery, but it's a forgery. I clicked again. This is the manifest Owen Brack wanted me to backdate, the one he hit me for. It's a chemical shipment. The Harbor Line Task Group is using the BUI as a cover to move toxic materials into those warehouses. The money trail is sloppy. They're routing it through public infrastructure budgets. I was done. The pictures, my grainy, terrified phone pictures, sat there between us. The case. Antonio looked at the screen. He didn't lean in. He just observed. He looked at the fake seal for a long time. He didn't ask me how I got them. He didn't ask me what the chemicals were for. He didn't ask me who Owen Brack was. He just absorbed the information. Finally, he lifted his eyes from the screen to my face. His question, when it came, was not what I expected. It landed with the weight of a judge's gavel. "What do you want to happen?" I stared at him. Owen had told me what to do. My boss at the archive told me what to file. The city told me what to ignore. No one had ever asked me what I wanted. He was turning the power. He was handing the weapon back to me, hilt first. I walked away from the table, toward the tall windows he had just left. The sea fog was rolling in, thick and white, obscuring the lights of the city, wrapping the observatory in a silent cotton shroud. "I have this dream," I said, my voice barely a whisper. I could see my reflection in the dark glass, the bandage a small, white square on my cheek. "I want to open a letterpress studio, a place where things are made by hand, where the truth has weight. You can feel it pressed into the paper. Navarro Letterpress." He came to stand beside me, not close, but sharing the window. "The old dam district," he said, his voice just as quiet. "That's where I grew up. Before we learned to read books, we learned to read the wind coming off the reservoir. You could smell the iron in it. You knew when the storms were coming, not by the sky, but by the pressure." We stood there for a minute, two people from different, broken parts of Ashport, a woman who believed in the truth of paper and a man who believed in the truth of the wind. My phone buzzed on the table. The sound was obscene, a violent interruption. It wasn't a text. It was a picture message. I walked over, my heart suddenly a cold, hard stone in my chest. I picked it up. It was a picture of Mrs. Dorothea Hale. She was in her apartment, asleep in her old, worn-out floral armchair, her head tilted back, her mouth slightly open. A peaceful, domestic scene. Except the photo was taken from inside her apartment. Owen. He had a key. He had been there. He was sending me a warning, a threat against a sleeping old woman. My blood ran cold, then it boiled over. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped the phone. Antonio was beside me. He didn't look at the phone. He looked at my face. He saw the shift from fear to a cold, pure rage. He held out his hand. "Let me see." I gave him the phone, looked at the image. His face did not change. He did not curse. He did not flinch. The calm in his eyes became something else. It became absolute. It became terrifying. He took his own phone from his pocket, made a call, and spoke one single, quiet sentence. "Encircle Dock 9 like a cathedral." He hung up. No bluster, no empty promises. Just a short, sharp, lethal command. He was putting a ring of steel around her. He looked at me. "She is safe. He will not get within a block of her again. Now, your turn." I took a deep, shuddering breath. "I'll help," I said. "I'll give you everything, but I have one condition." He waited. "I'm an archivist. I don't torch history. I keep it. I want them exposed, not erased, no scorched earth. Antonio, I want to pull the file. I want to show the city what they're doing. I want to unmask them, not wipe the trail. I want them seen." I expected him to argue, to tell me that wasn't how his world worked, that the only way to deal with a sickness was to cut it out, to burn it. He just watched me, his gaze analytical. Then, the barest hint of a smile touched the corner of his mouth. It was a sharp, quick expression, like the first clean pen stroke on a fresh sheet of paper. He nodded. "Vach mat," he repeated, the Vietnamese words sounding precise in his mouth. "Not erased. I can do that." We stood there under the cracked dome, the pact made. "So," he said, his voice a low rumble, "we have a rule, you and I. From now on, the truth, even when it is hard to hear." I looked at the bandage on my face, the phone with the picture of Dorothea, the glowing screen with the fake permits. "The truth," I agreed, "even when it's hard to hear." The invitation wasn't a question, it was a statement. "Tonight," Antonio had said, "you will come with me. You need to see the city from above the fog." He sent a car, not the silent gray sedan. This was a vintage black car, something from the 1940s, restored to such perfection it looked like liquid shadow. He was waiting inside. The place was called the Airy. It was impossible. A glass box suspended from the girders of the old Ashport Iron Bridge, hanging 100 feet over the dark, churning river. You reached it by a private glass elevator that hummed straight up from the pier. The entire structure vibrated, a low, steady tremor from the traffic passing overhead and the jazz quartet inside. The room was all dark wood, polished brass and deep blue velvet. The horn section, a trumpet and a sax, seemed to breathe bronze, their notes cutting clean and sharp through the cigar smoke. I wore the only nice thing I owned, a simple black dress with a square-cut neck that I'd bought at a thrift store and tailored myself. It was 3 years old. Alma's ointment had worked. The cut was a thin, pink line, and the bruise had faded to a pale, sallow yellow, easily hidden with a touch of makeup. I felt like a page of cheap newsprint bound in a leather book. Antonio, in a suit so dark it was almost black, was the book. He placed a hand on the small of my back to guide me to a table. His touch was light, just a point of contact, but it burned through the thin fabric. The room was full of Ashport's elite politicians, old money, men with faces as hard as currency. Their eyes slid over me, dismissing me in a fraction of a second. Just another girl. Then their eyes found Antonio, who stood behind my chair. The room corrected its posture. Conversations didn't stop, but the volume dipped. A man at a nearby table gave a slow, respectful nod. A woman in diamonds paused, her wine glass halfway to her red lips. Antonio commanded the space not by being loud, but by being the center of its gravity. He held my chair, a gesture so old-fashioned it was almost radical. He sat opposite me. The table was small. Our knees were inches apart. The quartet began a new song, a slow, mournful ballad with a driving bass line. The singer, a woman in a silver dress, stepped to the microphone. "This one's an old one," she purred. "It's Blue Ashport." The saxophone wept. Antonio leaned in. The noise of the room was a perfect shield for a quiet conversation. "You told me you were an archivist, that you loved the paper." His eyes were on my face, not in the assessing way he'd had before, but with a genuine, focused curiosity. "What's your favorite?" "What?" Typeface. "What's your favorite?" The question was so specific, so him. Not "what music do you like?" or "what's your favorite color?" He was asking about my work, my craft. "Garamond," I said, without thinking. "The original, from the 16th century, not the modern copies." "Why?" I looked at my hands, resting on the white tablecloth. "Because it's honest, it's not perfectly symmetrical. The letters have a human quality. The serifs, the little feet, they're slightly uneven. They were cut by a man's hand, not a machine. It's designed to be read, to be clear, not to show off. It's practical. It has flaws, and it's beautiful because of them. It feels like a real voice." I stopped, embarrassed. "I sound like a fanatic." "No," he said, his voice a low rumble. "You sound like you're talking about an old lover." My breath caught. He was right. That's exactly what it felt like. His eyes held mine, and in that moment, the room, the bridge, the music, it all fell away. There was just this man who saw the world in terms of wind pressure and who understood, instinctively, why a 500-year-old set of letters could feel like a person. Then his eyes shifted. It was a movement so small I almost missed it. His gaze moved from my face to a point just over my left shoulder. His focus didn't change, but his body did. It didn't tense. It settled. It became heavy, rooted to the chair. He was looking at the reflection in the dark glass of his untouched whiskey. "What is it?" I whispered. "The new musicians, sir," he said, his voice perfectly level. "The trumpet player is holding his horn wrong." I turned my head. Slowly. A new trio was walking onto the small, raised stage. The original band was on a break. These men were dressed in the same black suits, but they were stiff. They carried their instrument cases. They were not musicians. They were from the Langley Triad. I'd seen their faces on data files, encroachment reports. The man in the middle, the one Antonio had noticed, laid his trumpet case flat on the stage. He didn't open it. He clicked the latches. Antonio was already moving. He was standing, his hand reaching for me, not my arm, not my waist, my hand. "Lila," he said, his voice a command. The man on stage opened the case. It wasn't a trumpet. It was a shotgun, matte black, short-barreled. Time stopped. The singer's last note hung in the air. I didn't scream. I didn't freeze. My mind, the archivist's mind, clicked through facts. Posh establishment, iron bridge, high fire code compliance, mandatory systems. To Antonio's left, on the brass panel by the exit, was a small red lever under glass. It wasn't a fire alarm. It was the halon system, smoke suppression, DAPCOI. As the first shot exploded, shattering the wall of glass behind the bar, I didn't run away. I lunged toward Antonio, toward the wall. I smashed the glass with my elbow, the pain a distant, bright spark. I yanked the red lever down. For 1 second, nothing happened. The second shot rang out, hitting the brass saxophone on the stage, which screamed like a dying animal. Then, with a deafening, pressurized hiss, the entire floor of the club vanished, thick white. Choking foam erupted from vents in the floor, not fire suppressant water, but an oxygen-starving smoke cloud. It rose from ankle to waist height in 3 seconds. The room was chaos. Screaming, confusion, the gunmen were blind, firing into a white void. "This way," Antonio's voice was in my ear. His hand, which had been reaching for mine, found it. His grip was steel. He didn't pull me. He led me. We plunged into the white foam. We were moving toward a service door I hadn't even seen, hidden behind a velvet curtain. He kicked it open. We were outside, on a narrow, vibrating metal walkway, the sky bridge, a maintenance catwalk, hanging in the open air, 100 feet above the water. The wind tore at my dress, whipping my hair across my face. The roar of the traffic above us was a physical blow. We ran. The metal grid of the floor was open, and I could see the dark, churning water directly below my feet. The whole bridge was shaking. Behind us, shouts and another gunshot, muffled by the wall. We reached the central pylon, a massive tower of black iron. We ducked behind it. I leaned against the cold, wet steel, my chest heaving, my stocking torn at the knee, my elbow bleeding. The city glittered below us, a cold, electric tapestry. The lights on the harbor buoys and the ships in the channel blinked on and off, a rhythm, a message, like Morse code. He stood beside me, not even breathing hard, just watching the door we had come through. No one followed. He turned to me. His face was all shadows, lit only by the distant city. "Scared?" he asked. The adrenaline was a high, thin wire in my blood. I was terrified, but I was also, strangely, alive. I had seen the lever. I had pulled it. I had done something. "Yes," I said, my voice shaking, "but you don't let the fear decide the typeface." He looked at me for a long time. The wind howled around us. I could feel the thrum of the bridge in my bones, in my teeth. Then, slowly, he leaned in. He gave me every chance to pull away. He didn't grab me. He didn't rush. He moved with that same deliberate, heavy grace. I didn't pull away. He kissed me. It was not a passionate kiss. It was not hungry or desperate. It was slow. It was firm. It was a commitment. It was his mouth, surprisingly soft, pressing against mine. A statement of fact. It tasted of whiskey, cold air, and iron. It was a soft promise between two very hard people. A period at the end of a sentence. When he pulled back, he didn't let go of my hand. "The car is at the pier," he said. He didn't take me to his home, a penthouse I assumed existed somewhere high above the city. He didn't take me to a safe house. He took me back to the observatory. When we stood at the heavy oak door, the moon shining through the cracked dome, he finally released my hand. "You chose this space," he said, his voice low. "It's yours. Let it choose you back." He wasn't coming in. I understood. He was protecting me, not possessing me. This was my sanctuary, and he would not breach it. I unlocked the door and stepped inside, into the circle of golden lights. I turned back. He was still on the step, a guardian in a bespoke suit, the city and its dangers spread out far below him. "You'll stay," I whispered. "I will stay," he said. I nodded. I closed the heavy door, and I shot the old, thick iron bolt. It slid home with a heavy, satisfying thud. I was locked in. He was locked out. I went to the table and turned on the kettle. I could feel him, on the other side of that 3-inch thick oak, a sentry. A man guarding not just a person, but a word, the truth. The sound of the rain started as a tap-tap-tapping against the glass dome, a nervous percussion. I sat at the small table, the warm, untouched mug of tea in my hands. I could feel him on the other side of the door, a solid, immovable weight. He was a sentry, a man of impossible patience, but he was also a man, standing in a storm. The tapping grew into a steady, drumming roar. The entire dome began to hum, a low, resonant note that vibrated in my chest. It was a lonely sound, the sound of the sky weeping. I couldn't leave him out there. He had walked through a firefight for me. He had stood on a vibrating sky bridge. He had respected the sanctity of my door. I stood up. I walked across the room, my stockinged feet silent on the rug. My hand closed over the heavy, cold iron bolt. I pulled it back. The sound of the metal scraping open was shockingly loud, a definitive choice. I opened the door. He was there, exactly as I had left him, a silhouette against the gray, churning mist. His dark hair was slick with rain, his suit jacket soaked at the shoulders. He wasn't looking at the city anymore. He was looking at the door, as if he had been waiting for the exact moment I would open it. He stepped inside, bringing the storm with him, the clean, sharp scent of cold air, wet wool, and something ancient like damp wood. He didn't move further into the room. He just stood on the threshold, letting the rain drip from his coat onto the stone floor. He was waiting for my permission. "You're a free man, Antonio," I whispered, my voice sounding small against the storm. "You are free to leave." He looked at me, his dark eyes unreadable in the dim, golden light. "I am not free," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Not while Owen Brack is still breathing, but that is my burden. It is not your prison." He unbuttoned his suit jacket, not to take it off, but just to ease its lines, a gesture of a man settling in. "I protect Lila. I don't imprison. There is a vast difference." "It feels like a fine line," I said, my arms crossed over my chest. "Then we will find that line." "Yeah," he said, "together." He took a slow step toward me, closing the distance. The air between us became charged, heavy. He was so much taller than I was, a column of damp, cold fabric radiating an intense, bodily warmth. He stopped, close enough for me to feel the heat, but not touching. He lifted his hand, slowly, giving me every second to retreat. He didn't reach for my face or my hair. He lifted his hand to my shoulder, his fingers hovering for a heartbeat, his eyes asking the question. I nodded, just a small dip of my chin. His hand settled on my shoulder, warm and heavy, his thumb brushing my collarbone through the thin fabric of my dress. The simple, solid contact was a relief. It was an anchor. My entire body leaned into that single point of contact, craving its stability. My fear, my tension, it just unspooled. I turned my head and pressed my cheek, the one that still held the ghost of Owen's ring, the thin pink line into the warm, dry palm of his other hand. He let me. He held my face, his thumb stroking my skin. A gentle, corrective gesture. He was overwriting the file. He was healing the bruise with his touch. His gaze dropped to my mouth. He lowered his head, his movements unhurried, his breath warm. This wasn't the hard, declarative kiss on the bridge. This was a question, a conversation. His lips brushed mine, a feather-light touch, a simple test. I didn't pull away. I let out the breath I had been holding, a soft sigh that mingled with his. That was my answer. The kiss began. It was slow, it was deep, it was devastatingly patient. There was no hurry, no taking, no possession. It was a sharing of breath, a yielding of ground. His hand slid from my shoulder to the small of my back. His fingers splayed wide, pulling me against the solid wall of his chest. I went. I rested my head against him, my ear pressed to the fine, damp wool of his suit. Underneath, I could hear it. Thump, 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 thump. The steady, powerful, reliable beat of his heart. It was the sound of an engine, of a harbor buoy in the fog. It was the sound of a life, calm and controlled, and for the first time, I was close enough to someone to hear it. I realized my own heart, usually a frantic bird, was slowing down, trying to match his. He held me like that for a long time, his chin resting on the top of my head, his arms a secure cage. He was so gentle, so slow. Every move he made was supportive. It felt like a piece of mature, slow jazz, not the frantic solos, but the deep, steady bass line that holds the entire composition together, a rhythm you could build a house on. Our bodies were in a dialogue. His hand would tighten almost imperceptibly on my back, pulling me closer. I would relax, melting into him. A silent yes. He would shift, his hand moving to cup the back of my head, and I would tilt my face up, a silent more. It was a waltz of trust, here in the dark, with the storm for music, a pull closer, an easing back to look at each other, a small, shared smile of confirmation, and then a continuation. I don't know how many hours passed, wrapped in his arms, the rain a steady drumbeat on the glass above us. Eventually, we were on the rug, lying side by side, still fully dressed. His suit jacket was off, folded neatly on the floor. His shoes were by the door. My head was on his arm, and we were just looking up. We watched the rain trace paths down the fractured dome, the golden lights reflecting in the wet glass. "Between doors," I said, my voice soft in the quiet room. "What was that?" His voice was a sleepy rumble, vibrating through his arm into my ear. "The name for my print shop?" I said. "I've been thinking. Navarro Letterpress is too plain. I like Between Doors, because that's where the truth is. It's not in the locked room, and it's not in the public square. It's in the space in between, the threshold, the place where you decide to enter or leave." He was quiet for a long moment. "It's good," he said finally. "It's yours." He paused, his fingers finding mine in the space between us, lacing them together. I was thinking, second light press. I turned my head to look at him. His face was relaxed in the soft light. "Why?" "Because you're an archivist," he said. "You work in the dark, bringing old truths to the light." And because his thumb stroked the back of my hand, "You gave me a second look, a second light. I am not a good man, Lila." "You are a just man," I whispered. "You protected Dorothea." "I keep my promises," he said. The silence that settled was comfortable, warm. The rain was softening, turning to a fine, whispering mist. "Antonio," I said, "I'm here. Don't break those doors for me, not unless you absolutely have to." He turned his head on the rug, his dark eyes finding mine. "I told you, I will only break the doors that lock justice away. Promise me, expose them. Don't just erase them." "I promise," he said. The rain was just a murmur now. The golden lights were soft. The observatory felt like a ship, a safe, warm bubble floating above a cold, dark ocean. I felt the exhaustion of the last 2 days, the chase, the fear, the adrenaline, all finally settle over me like a heavy, warm blanket. My eyelids grew heavy. He didn't let go of my hand. I drifted, falling into the first real, safe sleep I'd had in years. I felt him shift, felt him drape his discarded, dry suit jacket over me. I was warm. I was safe. A vibration. A harsh, angry, buzzing sound sliced through the peace. My eyes snapped open. The room was dark. The rain had stopped. Dawn was just a cold, gray rumor at the edge of the windows. The sound came again. My phone on the table. Its screen lit up, a harsh blue-white square of light in the darkness. I sat up, the jacket falling away. Antonio was already on his feet, all sleep gone, his body instantly tensed for violence. I walked to the table. I picked up the phone. I looked at the screen. My blood didn't run cold. It evaporated. It turned to ice and acid. It was a picture of Dorothea. She was in her apartment, in her floral armchair, but she wasn't sleeping. Her eyes were wide, white with terror. Her mouth was sealed with a wide, brutal strip of silver duct tape. Her frail, spotted hands were bound to the arms of the chair with thick, black zip ties. It was a new photo, a response, a declaration of war. Owen had broken into the cathedral. My breath was gone. The phone in my hand was a block of ice, and the image on the screen was a snapshot from hell. Dorothea, bound, gagged, terrified. Antonio's reaction was silent, but it was the most violent thing I had ever seen. The warmth from the night, the gentleness, the slow jazz, it all evaporated. The man who stood before me now was a different being. His stillness was absolute, his face a mask of cold, controlled fury. He was a weapon a single thought away from being fired. He took the phone from my shaking hand. He looked at the picture for exactly 1 second. Then he made a call. "He's at cold storage 11. I want a perimeter. I want him in a box. Alive." His voice was flat, lethal. Before he could finish the call, his other phone, a burner, buzzed. A text from Yara. He read it, and his jaw tightened. "Wait," he said into the first phone. "Hold." He hung up. "What is it?" I whispered. "They're faster than I thought," he said. He handed me the burner phone. It was a link to the Ashport City News website, a special report that had been posted just 10 minutes ago. Bureau of Urban Integrity Investigative Report. Archive employee linked to Ruggieri Consortium in data tampering scandal. My own face stared back at me, a grainy security photo from the archive entrance. The story was a masterpiece of fiction, a complete inversion of the truth. It painted me as a disgruntled employee, taking bribes from Antonio Ruggieri to falsify public records. It claimed the files on the Harborline Task Group were the originals and that my stolen data was a fabrication, a digital forgery I had created. Owen's fake permits were now the official truth. They had used their fake agency to legitimize their own crime and frame me for exposing it. My stomach heaved. They're discrediting the evidence before I can even use it. "It's smart," Antonio said, the words cutting. "They've flipped the narrative. Now, when I go in for the old woman, I'm not a rescuer. I'm a mafia boss silencing a witness and retrieving his accomplice." As if on cue, my own phone rang. A video call. The name on the screen made my blood freeze. "Owen Brack." I looked at Antonio. He nodded. Answer. I pressed the icon. Owen's pale, smug face filled the screen. He was in a car, the image grainy. "Good morning, Lila. Did you see my present? I do hope Dorothea is comfortable." "You bastard," I whispered, my voice shaking with rage. "Let her go." "Oh, I will. In a heartbeat, she's a sweet old lady, but she's in a very, very cold place." The video feed switched. It was Dorothea, exactly as she was in the picture, bound to the chair. She was in a vast, dark warehouse, her breath pluming in the air. She was shivering, the terror in her eyes absolute. "This is cold storage 11, Owen's voiceover said. The freezer units are running at about 20%, but I can make them run at 100%. Hypothermia is a quiet way to go. The feed switched back to his face. Or, you can prevent all that. You're an archivist. You know the protocols. I want the archive's central backup ledger, the entire hard drive, the real one. Not your stolen copies. I want the original. Bring it to Charging Dock 3 at the old Navy Yard. Be there at 11 p.m. Come alone if I see him. He nodded, as if he knew Antonio was watching. If I see so much as one of his men, the old woman becomes a history exhibit. The line went dead. I looked at Antonio. The mask was back, his face unreadable. I am going in, he stated. It wasn't a plan. It was a fact. I will have her in an hour. No, I grabbed his arm, my nails digging into the fine wool of his shirt. Antonio, wait, think if you go in empty-handed? What does that prove? It confirms everything they're saying. You'll be the thug. I'll be the accomplice. We might get Dorothea, but they'll win. They'll bury the truth. They'll walk away. He looked at my hand on his arm. She will freeze to death. Lila. She won't, I said, my mind racing, the archivist's logic clicking into place, finding the file path. He wants the ledger. That's his mistake. He's not just a thug. He's a records manager. He knows the digital copies I have are useless if he controls the master record, but he doesn't have it. And I don't either. Where is it? It's not in the archive. It's in the city data center, the real one, not our sublevel. It's a different cold room. Cold room 7, it's the central hub. They had to create a master key, a ledger override, to make the system accept their faked permits as valid. If I can get that override file, I don't just prove my case, I can digitally invalidate their entire operation. I can make their truth vanish. He was silent for a long moment, the gears turning. He was a general, seeing a new front open. A dual plan, he said. A dual plan, I agreed. You handle the perimeter, you get Dorothea, but you do it my way, not as a raid, as a rescue. Yara Quell appeared at the open doorway, as silent as the fog. She carried a heavy black case. He's right, Lila. They're smart, but we're smarter. She looked at Antonio. The Kitefell team is in place. They're eccentrics, but they're the best. They're running a ghost fiber line from this hill right now, splicing it into the municipal grid. It's high risk, but it will give us a direct, untraceable link to the antenna. Antenna, I asked. Radio Sparrow, Yara said, a rare, thin smile. Old pirate broadcast station in the Narrows. The city's been trying to shut it down for 10 years. It has a signal that reaches every car radio and television in Ashport. When you get that file, we can broadcast it to the whole city, unfiltered. The scale of it hit me. This wasn't just about a file. It was about a public execution. My burner phone rang. A different number, a blocked ID. I answered, pressing the record button I had preset. Is this the archivist? The voice was thin, reedy, and digitally distorted. Yes. Who is this? I'm a compliance officer at Harborline. The man sounded terrified. They're moving everything tonight, not just the chemicals on the manifest. They're moving the money. The real payout. They're using the BUI's emergency declaration, the one they created to catch you as cover, to empty the task group's slush fund. It's millions. You have to stop them. The line clicked dead. I looked at the recording. He's right. They're not just covering their tracks. They're cashing out. This changes the board, Antonio said. He looked at the file, then at me. If we release this, it will burn everyone, not just Owen, clerks, drivers, people who just stamped a form. The moral dilemma hung in the air, the weight of public safety versus individual privacy. My choice was instant. I was an archivist. I believed in redaction. We do it, I said, but we do it with conditions. Conditional transparency. The Kitefell team can blur the names of the low-level staff, the secretaries, the assistants, anyone not a signatory. But Owen, his superiors, the BUI officials, the ones who signed the checks, we show their names, we show their faces, we show their bank transfers, we burn the guilty, and we protect the innocent. Antonio nodded, a grim smile of approval. He turned to Yara. "It's time. Send the signal. Door by door." "Door by door," she confirmed, her eyes bright. "I like it." She was gone. "What's door by door?" I asked. "My promise," he said. He picked up his own phone and made the call. "This is Ruggieri. The word is door by door. Full welfare check operation. Start at Dock 9. Spread to all tenements. Check the factories, the sweatshops, any door that's locked when it shouldn't be. Any civilian held against their will. You open it. This is not a raid. This is a public service. Leave the innocent alone. Find anyone who needs help. Move." He hung up. While Owen and the BUI were painting him as a monster, he was activating his entire network to rescue the city's forgotten. A counter-narrative written in action, not in ink. He turned to me. The weight of the day, of the life in my hands, settled on me. He saw it. He stepped forward and pulled me into a brief, hard hug. His arms were steel, a moment of absolute, grounding strength. He pressed his face into my hair for just a second. "This is the hard road, Lila," he whispered, his voice rough, "but it's the right one." He released me and picked up a nondescript gray engineer's jacket and a laminated ID card from Yara's case. The ID had my picture, taken from a distance, and a new name. "Yara will get you into the sublevels of Cold Room 7, he said. "The Kitefell team will be your eyes. Get the file. I will get Dorothea." I looked at the clock on the wall. It was 4:05 in the morning. Owen wanted the drive by 2300. We had less than 19 hours to open every door that mattered. The gray engineer's jacket was stiff, the plastic hard hat ridiculously large. The ID card Yara had given me was a perfect forgery, naming me as a third-party HVAC inspector. I swiped it at the service entrance for Cold Room 7, the city data center. The lock buzzed green. "You have 20 minutes, Max," Yara's voice crackled in my earpiece. A tiny, skin-colored bud. "After that, the system's nightly integrity check will flag the door. The Kitefell team is looping the camera feeds, but they can't stop the server logs." I pushed the heavy, insulated door open. The cold hit me like a physical blow. A solid wall of air so dry and frigid it stole the breath from my lungs. This wasn't the archive's gentle chill. This was a hostile, technological cold, designed to keep machines alive, not people. The room was a canyon of towering black server racks, their blinking green and blue lights the only illumination, their combined hum a single, deafening electronic monotone. I was not a hacker. I was an archivist, and this was not a hack. This was a filing problem. "I'm heading to the K aisle," I whispered, my voice sounding thin in the roar. I moved past racks labeled for transit, for payroll, for the water commission. I knew the city's filing system. I knew their backup protocols. While I was descending into the city's digital heart, Antonio's promise was unfolding on the surface. The door-by-door operation was not a raid. It was an audit, conducted by men in dark work coats. They moved through Dock 9 not as a gang, but as a municipal force, quiet and efficient. They didn't kick doors down. They popped locks, using slim jims and tension wrenches, a quiet click and snick. At apartment 3B, they found Mr. Kowalski, 82 years old, locked in by his own landlord over a missed rent payment. They cut the padlock and carried him out. In the basement of a garment factory on 9th Street, they found 12 women from the night shift, locked in and forced to work a 36-hour run. The foreman's door was opened, and he was quietly removed. In the back of a bodega, a young man was zip-tied to a pipe. One by one, the locked doors of Ashport were being opened, the ones no one ever checked, the ones that held the city's forgotten. The slogan from the news report was being made real, but its meaning was being inverted. Every door in Thessaly was broken down, but they were being broken down to let people out, not to drag them in. At Cold Storage 11, Yara Quell was on the roof, securing the perimeter. A shadow moved near the ventilation housing, a man in black, one of the Langley Triad gunmen from the jazz club. He raised a suppressed pistol. Yara didn't hesitate. She ran straight at him. He fired. The shot a quiet foot. Chipping the concrete at her feet, she tackled him, and they both tumbled through the open door of the industrial freight elevator, crashing onto the metal grid floor. He was bigger, stronger. He scrambled to his feet, raising the gun. The elevator was a cage, 30 feet deep. Yara on her back, kicked out, not at him, but at the control panel by the door. Her heel shattered the plastic emergency stop button. The magnetic brakes on the elevator disengaged. The floor dropped out from under them. It wasn't a free fall, but a gut-wrenching emergency lurch, a drop of 10 feet before the safety governors caught. For 1/10 of a second, they were both weightless. The gunman, caught standing, was thrown off balance, his arms flailing. Yara, already on the floor, used the momentum. She coiled and sprang, driving her shoulder into his knees, buckling him. He crashed against the steel wall, his head cracking against a support beam. The gun clattered to the floor. Yara scooped it up as the elevator continued its slow, grinding emergency descent. She checked his pulse. He was alive. She disabled the threat. I found it. Aisle K. The hum of the servers was a physical weight. My fingers were numb, my lips stiff. K22, K23. It was a standard archival shelf, just like in my own archive, holding physical backup media, my knowledge, my world. Yara, I'm at the shelf, I whispered. Where is it? Kitefell says the checksum file is physically isolated. Look for the disguise. I scanned the shelf. Tapes, data cartridges, binders. And then I saw it, a single, gray, cardboard banker's box with a label printed in plain, boring Arial. Office supplies, forms, Rec 088B. It was the most boring thing on the shelf. It was the perfect disguise. I pulled the box down. It was light, inside. Beneath stacks of triplicate requisition forms was a single, silver hard drive module, the Ledger Override. I have it, I said, my heart hammering against my ribs so hard I thought it would stall. Get the key. Yara's voice was tight. The key's in the typeface. I looked around. On the same shelf. Another box. This one was different, black, elegant, with a designer label. The Bodoni Collection. Rare archival typefaces. I opened it. Inside, nestled in black velvet, was not a set of metal type. It was a single, custom-made USB drive, shaped like a calligrapher's pen. The master key. A piece of technical art, hidden as a piece of classical art. I slotted the override drive into my laptop, then plugged in the USB key. A prompt appeared. Sign ledger. My fingers flew. I wasn't just copying the data. I was using the master key to countersign my own digital evidence, validating it with the city's own secret signature. I was rewriting the official record. I was making my truth the truth. A progress bar, 5%. Be-un, be-un, be-un. A sound that didn't belong. An alarm, not the building alarm. The server rack itself. A physical breach alarm. Be-un, be-un. Red lights began to flash on the rack, strobing, reflecting off the metal. Lila, they triggered a silent alarm, Yara yelled in my ear. The login, it wasn't the door. Someone else is in the system. Get out. 75%. I heard a heavy thud from the end of the aisle. A security guard. 90%. Get out, now he's coming. 100% signature verified. I ripped the drive and the key out. I shoved the small silver drive down the back of my jacket, the cold metal burning my skin. I kept the key in my fist. I ran. The guard shouted. I ducked under a row of cables, my hard hat falling off. The aisle was a blur of flashing red lights, pulsing like a printer error. The hum of the servers, a rising scream. I slammed my hand on the door release bar and burst out into the concrete service hallway, back into the warm, wet air of the city's tunnels. At the same time, across town, Antonio's team was in position at Cold Storage 11. They had thermal readings, 3 guards in a small, heated office, and 1 heat signature, low and weak, in the freezer. Dorothea. We go, Antonio said. But they didn't go in with guns. They went to the building's exterior CO2 condenser units. They didn't break the door. They rerouted the pipes. The guards in the office heard a hiss. The ventilation, which had been pumping in warm air, suddenly blasted a thick, white, choking cloud of carbon dioxide into the room. What the? They were choking in seconds. The gas was cold, heavy, and stole the oxygen from the air. They couldn't breathe. They stumbled from the office, gagging, their hands at their throats, collapsing onto the loading dock. Antonio's men, wearing gas masks, were on them in an instant, disarming them, binding them. Antonio himself, mask on, went in. He walked you through the office, into the main freezer. The air was a frozen fog. He found her, Dorothea, slumped in the chair, blue and shivering, but alive. He cut the zip ties. He gently ripped the tape from her mouth. He lifted her frail, light body into his arms, wrapping her in his own heavy wool coat. He hit the comms button. Package is secure. She's alive. The feed was patched through to me. I was in the back of Yara's speeding van, sirens wailing in the distance, my heart still trying to escape my chest. I heard his voice, and then I heard hers. A weak, thin, reedy sound. She was lisping, her mouth numb from the tape. She was muttering a prayer, a fragment of a hymn. I heard her. I heard Dorothea's voice, alive. I put my head in my hands, the USB key still clutched in my fist, and I laughed. I was crying, great, shuddering, silent sobs of relief, but I was laughing. We hit a bump, and I was thrown against the wall of the van. "We're at the station," Yara said. "Radio Sparrow is yours. Tell the city its story. Lila." I plugged the drive into the broadcast console. The Kitefell team had already worked their magic, redacting the low-level names, highlighting the guilty. I hit the broadcast key. Across Ashport, on every radio, on every television, the signal glitched. The morning news vanished, replaced by my data. The city heard no voice. It just saw the truth. It saw the flowchart of money, moving from the Harbor Line Task Group to shell companies. It saw the perfect high-resolution scan of the fake Bureau of Urban Integrity seal, next to the scan of the real one. It saw Owen Brack's signature. It saw his internal call logs, his texts to the BUI director. It saw the chemical manifests he had tried to bury. The city, for the first time, was reading its own secret history, written by me. A new text came to Antonio's phone, from an unknown number. "He's gone. Brack wasn't in the warehouse. He was never there. He's in the wind." The curtain had been pulled back, but the main actor had just escaped the stage. The broadcast from Radio Sparrow was a digital earthquake. The city was waking up. Its collective phone screens and car radios flooded with the raw, undeniable data of its own corruption. But Owen Brack was a ghost. Yara had tracked him, not through tech, but through a string of terrified calls he'd made to low-level Harbor Line employees. He was cornered. He had run to the one place he thought he had leverage. We arrived at the Northcutt Sea Dam as the first light tore the sky from black to a cold, bruised gray. The dam was a monument of concrete, a brutalist wall holding the angry. Gray ocean back from the low-lying houses of the old dam district, Antonio's district. The wind was a physical thing, a knife edge of salt and industrial iron. And there he was. Owen Brack wasn't the slick manager anymore. He was a terrified, rain-soaked animal, standing on the central catwalk next to a yellow metal cabinet, the dam's manual floodgate controls. The gun in his hand was steady, but it wasn't aimed at us. It was pressed to the glass panel of the control box. "That's far enough. Ruggieri," he shrieked, his voice thin and torn by the wind. "I know you're there. I see your men on the gantry. One more step and I open the valves, I'll purge the whole system. I'll drown every house in the old dam district just to watch something wash clean." I saw Antonio freeze, 50 yards away. Yara, prone on an upper strut, didn't move her rifle. This was the checkmate, a suicidal move that would murder thousands. Antonio couldn't counter it. "He's bluffing," Yara's voice whispered in my earpiece. "The pressure would fight him. I can take the shot." "No," Antonio's voice was clipped. "The panel, a stray bullet, a short circuit, he could trigger it by dying. Stand down, all of you." He couldn't move, but I could. I wasn't a gunman. I was the accomplice. I was the archivist. I stepped out from behind a concrete piling, my hands raised. "Owen!" I shouted, the wind ripping the name from my mouth. "It's me, it's Lila." He flinched, the gun wavering, then snapping to me, "Lila, you ruined me, you ruined everything." I walked forward slowly, my boots heavy on the metal walkway. "This isn't your file to delete, Owen," I said, my voice carrying, cold and sharp. "These are lives. This isn't a misplaced invoice." "Shut up, you know nothing." "I know everything," I said, stopping 10 feet from him. I could see the wild, white terror in his eyes. He was a man who had lost the thread. "I am an archivist. Owen, I keep the past to save the future. You're standing there, threatening to burn both, all because you got caught." "You think I'm the one who burns?" He laughed, a high, cracking, hysterical sound. "You think this was my idea? I'm a link, I'm a middle manager. You think I wanted to move that much vinyl chloride? You think I wanted to put my name on those manifests?" "Then who, Owen, who gave the order?" "The people who own the orders," he screamed, spittle flying from his lips. "The people who own the BUI Vice Director Marrow. Marrow. That's the name he built the whole thing. The Bureau of Urban Integrity isn't a city agency, you stupid girl. It is a private corporation with a public seal, a protection racket he built to approve his own shipments and launder the money. I was just managing the paperwork. The final file, the architect of the fake seal. Marrow." Antonio's voice came from my left. He had moved like smoke, his own gun in his hand, but pointed at the deck, a posture of negotiation, not aggression. Owen spun, his gun shaking, trying to cover both of us. "Stay back! Ruggieri! I'll do it!" "He's right, Owen," Antonio said, his voice a calm, reasonable blade in the chaos. "Marrow set you up. The broadcast this morning, it burned you. Not him. Your name is on the digital transfers. Your signature is on the files. He's clean. You're the one left holding the bag. He'll put a bullet in you himself just to tie up the loose end." "No," Owen stammered, his bravado collapsing. "No, he said he'd protect me. He promised." "He won't," Antonio said, taking another slow step. "But you have one card left to play. Me, the Ashport Civic Tribunal. It's an old charter my lawyers are reviving. A citizen's court. You testify. Owen, you give us Marrow. You give us the entire network, from the docks to his office. And I give you a chance to see next week. I give you protection." A new sound cut through the wind, not the waves, the high, angry whine of a speedboat engine, coming in fast from the open sea, moving with suicidal speed toward the dam's service dock. A black, sleek boat slammed against the pilings below. 2 men leaped out. One was a mountain in tactical gear. The other was tall, thin, and wore a pristine gray suit that the wind didn't dare touch. Marrow. He didn't look like a bureaucrat, and he looked like a blade. He didn't shout. He didn't negotiate. He raised a long-barreled pistol with a suppressor, aimed at the catwalk, and fired. The shot pinged off the railing, a searing spark of metal just inches from my face. "Yara," Antonio roared. A sharp thwump from the gantry above, a canister landed on the dock below, exploding in a thick cloud of white smoke. Another landed 10 feet from us on the catwalk, instantly shrouding us in a disorienting, choking fog. Marrow and his man were firing blind into the cloud. "The gate!" I screamed, grabbing Antonio's jacket. "The structural plans. I remember the plans for the dam. The archive. The bones. I had digitized them myself. Northcutt Dam. Sector 4 manual safety overrides." "There's a storm shield," I yelled, pulling him through the smoke, away from the gunfire. "A manual rolling gate. It's here." I found it, set into the concrete wall of the control house. A heavy, red-painted iron lever, emergency catwalk shield. I threw my entire weight on it. It didn't budge. Seized with rust and salt. "Help me." Antonio's strength joined mine. We put our backs into it. With a metallic scream of tortured, rusted metal, the lever gave. A deafening, grinding roar filled the air. A 3-inch thick, corrugated steel wall began to descend from the ceiling, slamming down onto the catwalk, a curtain of iron separating our section from the one Marrow was on. Bullets sparked and wanged against the other side of the descending steel. Too late. Marrow was locked out. But he wasn't alone. The bodyguard, the mountain, had been faster. He had plunged through the smoke an instant before the gate began to drop. He was on our side. He was here. He saw Antonio, saw the greater threat, and lunged, a combat knife appearing in his fist. Antonio moved. It wasn't a fight. It was paper folding. It was the swift, brutal, and economical movement of a master. He didn't punch. He moved inside the man's arc, using the lunge, deflecting the knife hand, an elbow to the throat, a pivot, a hand twisting the wrist, a knee to the solar plexus. The man folded. He collapsed in a silent, boneless heap. It took less than 3 seconds. While he'd done that, I had scrambled to the yellow control panel. Owen was sobbing against the railing. I looked at the glass. Marrow's bullet had starred it, but the light inside was flashing. A pulsing, angry red, valve pressure critical. My God, he'd actually done it. The threat was real. My mind raced. Archivist, HVAC inspector, technical manual. I had memorized the override codes as part of my cover. I shoved Owen aside. My fingers flew. I didn't hit the cancel button. That could cause a feedback loop. I hit systems check, then manual override, then safe lock engage. I was rerouting the command. I wasn't stopping the flood. I was securing the valves, filing them as locked safe in the system's own language. The red light stopped flashing. A steady, green light clicked on. Valves secure. I sagged against the panel. The threat was over. The old dam district would sleep through the dawn, never knowing. Owen was staring at me, his mouth open. You fixed it. It's what I do, Owen, I said, my voice shaking. I file things correctly. They'll kill me, he suddenly shrieked, his terror returning, his eyes on the steel wall. He's trapped, but he'll send others. Marrow will kill me. Ruggieri, your deal. Protect me, protect me. From the other side of the steel wall, we heard a furious, muffled shout, then the sound of the speedboat's engine, revving high. Marrow was retreating. He was trapped by a door he couldn't break, and on this side, his star witness was still alive. His spirit was broken. I looked at Antonio. He gave a single, sharp nod. I unclipped a small, black microphone from the inside of my jacket. Yara had given it to me, a direct patch to the Radio Sparrow broadcast signal. I held it out to Owen. He's right, I said, my voice hard. They will kill you, unless the truth gets to them first. You want protection. Here it is. Tell the city. Tell them Marrow's name. Tell them everything. Now. Owen stared at the microphone, his eyes wide. He grabbed it. He put it to his lips. My name, he stammered, his voice cracking. My name is Owen Brack, and Vice Director Marrow, he made me do it. He made me do it all. The final locked door, the one marked Justice. We had just kicked it open. Owen Brack's voice, thin and terrified, poured out of every radio in Ashport. It was raw, unedited, and backed by the irrefutable data I had pulled from Cold Room 7. He confessed everything. He named Marrow. He detailed the chemical shipments, the money laundering, the forged permits. He talked about the Harbor Line Task Group and the Bureau of Urban Integrity, painting a perfect, damning picture of the entire conspiracy, the city, waking to its morning coffee. Heard the name Marrow echo through the morning fog like a funeral bell. The fallout was immediate. It was an avalanche. By noon, the Harbor Line Task Group was dissolved, its assets frozen. By 3 o'clock, the Bureau of Urban Integrity was stormed, not by police, but by city auditors and a newly formed temporary city committee, a citizens' oversight group pulled from community leaders, the fake agency, built on paper-thin lies, evaporated the moment the real truth hit the light. Antonio was true to his word. He faded back. His men, who had rescued a dozen people in the door-by-door operation, vanished before the official police arrived. He let the city's own, albeit flawed, legal process take the lead. He stood back and let the machine I had set in motion do its work. He had kept his promise to me. We had exposed them, not erased them. We hadn't burned the records. We had published them. My first stop was Dock 9. Alma, Antonio's physician, was already there. Dorothea was sitting up in her own bed, not the floral armchair. She was wrapped in a thick cashmere blanket, sipping warm, sweet tea. When she saw me, her eyes, still shadowed with trauma, filled with tears. "My little paper speaker," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "You made the paper shout." I just held her hand, my heart too full to speak. That afternoon, while the city was reeling, I went to a small, rented workspace. I had a small, antique tabletop hand press I'd been restoring for a year. I inked it for the first time. I set the type, my hand steady. The typeface was Garamond. I pressed the first page. It was a simple flyer, a single sheet. At the top, in bold, clean letters, it read "Between Doors Press." And below that, a simple headline, "The Doors We Open." It was a short, true story about the door-by-door operation. It told the names of the people rescued, Mr. Kowalski, the women in the factory. It was the other half of the story, the human half, the part that wasn't about data, but about people. I left a stack of them at the Dock 9 Community Center. The final piece of the knot was still loose. Marrow. My phone rang. It was Antonio. His voice was calm. "He's trying to run. He's at the South Quay, trying to board a container ship." "Are you going to stop him?" "My men have," he said. "They've just closed a door on him. A 20-ton shipping container has been accidentally misplaced, blocking his escape route. He's trapped on the pier. The Port Authority police are on their way. But they're 5 minutes out. He's mine for these 5 minutes." I heard the unspoken question. He was giving me the final command, the power. I could tell him to end it, to deliver the justice his world understood, to erase the man who had ordered Owen to hit me, who had terrorized Dorothea. I looked at the hand press, the fresh, clean ink on my fingers, the smell of paper and truth. "Bring him ashore, Antonio," I said, my voice clear and steady. "Put him on the dock, in the light. Let the committee handle the rest." I heard him let out a long, slow breath. It wasn't relief, it was approval. "As you wish," he said. The knot was untied, not with a bullet, with procedure, with the truth, the choice I had made from the very beginning. The afternoon paper said it all. The headline was huge, splashed across the front page. "Who hit you?" The Mafia boss asked the next day. Every door in the city was broken down. But the article, the one written under that sensationalist title, wasn't about a mafia war. It was about my story. It was about the data I had broadcast. It was about the door-by-door operation, the rescue of Mr. Kowalski. It was about the doors of locked-in laborers, the doors of illegal cold storage units, and the final, public confession of Owen Brack. The story had been reframed. The doors were not acts of violence. They were acts of liberation. That evening, I was at the observatory, packing my few things. I was ready to go back to my apartment, back to my life. The heavy oak door opened. Antonio stood there. He wasn't in a suit. He was wearing dark trousers, a simple black shirt, and his wool coat. He looked softer. He wasn't carrying flowers or champagne. He was carrying a single, new, brass key. He held it out to me. "I have something for you," he said. "It's a small place on Stonewick Street. The light is good in the mornings." I took the key. "A safe house." "A print shop," then he said. "The lease is for 2 years. It's prepaid." I looked at him, my heart stopping. "Antonio, it's in your name," he said, cutting me off before I could argue. "Only your name. There is no co-ownership. There are no strings. A man I know owed me a favor, and the space became available. It's yours. Lila, a place to make things true." I looked at the key in my palm. Between Doors Press, he had given me a place to build my dream. No possession, just protection, a space to be free. I stepped forward, and the distance between us closed. The smell of fresh ink and new paper was still on my clothes. I wrapped my arms around his waist, pressing my face into the warm, rough wool of his coat. He was solid. He was real. His arms came around me, holding me tightly. His hands clasped at the small of my back. He buried his face in my hair. We just stood there for a long time, breathing each other in, a silent, mutual surrender. He pulled back, just enough to look at me. His hands came up to frame my face, his thumbs stroking my cheeks. "Lila," he whispered. He kissed me. It was slow and deep, and it was a promise. It was the kiss of a man who had seen a war and was finally home. My hands found his, and our fingers interlaced. We stood there, under the cracked dome, our foreheads pressed together, our bodies leaning into each other, two separate, strong volumes finally coming together to close the book. The Ashport lighthouse, dark for a decade, suddenly cut a beam of brilliant, white light through the fog, sweeping across the harbor. The city was turning its lights back on. I smiled, my head still resting against his. "You know," I whispered, "you don't have to ask it anymore. Who hit you? It's over." He kissed my forehead, a soft, firm press. "I will always ask, Lila," he replied, his voice a low, protective rumble. "Not because I'm looking for a fight, but to make sure, for the rest of our lives, that no one ever dares to be the second." He let go of my hand and reached for the heavy oak door of the observatory, the door that had been my sanctuary. He pulled it shut behind us, the old lock clicking softly into place. Then he took my hand and opened the door in front of us, the one that led out to the stairs, to the city. The smell of the sea, clean and sharp and full of promise, flooded in. A new chapter had begun. Thank you so much for listening to this story. We'd love to know where in the world you're tuning in from. Please drop a comment below. Share your thoughts and let's connect. Don't forget to subscribe to Mafia Boss Stories, like this video, and give us a little extra support by hitting that hype button. It helps more than you know and gets this story heard by so many more people. We'll see you in the next one.